Audible to you?
Yes, Rashi.
Yes, your voice is audible.
Okay. So, welcome to this lovely presentation by Laksha. A small introduction for Laksha. Laksha is a passionate and a dedicated counselor from Bangalore with over a year of experience with dynamic field of therapy and child psychology. She currently is an in-house psychologist at Health Basics. Her professional journey is marked by profound commitment to mental health, beginning with her impactful role at the Alternative Story, where she provided compassionate counseling to diverse clients aged between 12 to 60. Laksha's approach is deeply empathetic, focusing on holistic and well-being and empowering individuals to navigate their unique challenges. Thank you, Laksha, for taking up this session for us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rashi. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody is having a good evening today. Today, the topic that I chose for this specific workshop that we usually do, twice a month. So this month, last month, I had done a workshop on the basics of child counseling, where we went through a few techniques of child counseling and how that can be implemented in a school setting. Today I wanted to speak about because we had a lot of questions of what are the kinds of intervention we can do with children, how can we help children, apart from just the counseling aspect. So this time I wanted to make the workshop a little more diverse, not just for counselors but also for educators, special educators, teachers, everybody who's working with children, so even parents, etc. So today I wanted to talk about how growth mindset and self-esteem in children, how we as adults around children can help facilitate growth mindset and self-esteem, which also impacts children in a very positive way. So moving ahead, today's agenda or what we would be talking about is what is growth mindset. I feel that that's a very new topic, something that's been upcoming right now. So what is growth mindset? How can we promote growth mindset with children? How self-esteem is important, and how can we build that for children around us, right? So before we move ahead, I think I wanted to just break the ice, understand the people who are with us today. So what now? Let's say we are given sort of responsibility for a child who is sort of coming to us telling that they feel like they cannot succeed, they feel like they cannot do a good job. So what is one empowering phrase that we would want to tell this child to help them, make them feel better? you know so we have about 15, 16 participants here. So can maybe you can unmute yourself and you can tell me, or what is that one empowering phrase that you can tell a child that can help them succeed when they feel like they cannot. You can even put in the chat. We'll sort of take 2 minutes and then we'll move ahead. Okay, so Deepshika says that the power is within you. It's just 4 to 5 words, but then it's so impactful, that the power to change, the power to do anything is within us. So I think the power is within you. Soumya says that success is how you are working to attain, end goal is the result only. So you're, rather than focusing on the end goal, let us focus on the journey, let us focus on the process of attaining that goal, right? And Ashita also says that you got this. So it's as simple as this, it's simple phrases like this, doesn't have to be complicated, self, like deep awareness, deep self. It's just as simple as you got this, or the power is within you. It's just as simple words as this that can change the perspective of how a child look at themselves, right? So that is what the whole idea is, how we can communicate. A lot of how we sort of impact children's life is through the way we communicate to them, is the way, and they're sort of observing at all times, the way we communicate, the tone of our voice, how we appreciate them. All of that is what impacts their mental health, and in the sort of process impacts their self-esteem, their self-concept, all of that. So, to understand what is growth mindset, the concept of growth mindset was sort of popularized, or sort of given meaning by this psychologist called Carol Dweck. She's written a beautiful book about what is growth mindset. It's a self-help book. So this book was something, I think, when I was a school counselor, I read it for my personal sort of understanding. But then I think that was something that I was able to use with the students I was working as well. So basically, this concept of growth mindset emphasizes that the intelligence and the abilities that we have can be developed through our effort and persistence, right? And it is this we it is that the power is within us. I think someone had mentioned right now is that the power is within us, and it's just our responsibility, it is our understanding of how we can sort of grow this, right? Rather than a fixed mindset where we are looking at certain traits are unchangeable, certain things are innate. For having a fixed mindset in the context of that, oh, it's just fate, so I don't think I can do it, it's not within me to do it. That's a very fixed mindset, so you just stay where you are rather than focusing on the bigger thing, rather than focusing on the next part of the journey. So this growth mindset focuses that all of these things are within us, and what we need to do is be able to nurture that, right? So for example, by replacing statements like "you're so smart," right? So here, when we tell a child that you're so smart, they're like, "Oh my god!" Like, this is the highest validation we can get, and then that's a very fixed mindset thought. Is that you're so smart, it just ends there. There is no growth after that, right? But if you replace that very simple statement with "you really worked hard on this," here we're appreciating the child for that specific thing they've done. It's not a very vague appreciation or a vague validation, but it is for that specific task that they've done. So if the child is, say, a first grade student, they're able to solve basic addition, subtraction, sums. Rather than saying "you're so smart," it just, smart is such a vague term, right? But when we say "you really worked hard on this," or "you really did a good job with this," we're appreciating for the specific thing that they're done. So they're like, "Okay, you know what, I did a good job at this, so I can do better." So then they're immediately moving to the next goal, right? We're appreciating for them for the current goal, and also pushing them for the future, right? So that is the example of growth mindset. I think we can put this in any context of our life, and see that, say, after this presentation, if it goes well, rather than saying that, "Oh, I did all my workshops go really well," I can be that I did a very good job with this presentation, and then I would focus on the next presentation that I'm going to do. So it's not just for children, but then it's also for adults, for people like us, to focus on what's the next best thing we can do, but also appreciating what the goal that we've achieved. So so by modeling this growth mindset, we can encourage positive self-talk that's more relevant, and that's more in touch with reality. Because I've noticed a lot of positive self-talk right after I graduated, just telling my client that "you got this, you can do this," it's very vague, it's just out there. But rather than focusing on positive self-talk that's more relevant, or that makes a lot of sense to what the child is going through, and giving them a very realistic perspective of that everything is not going to be sunshine and roses, but we are going to do our best, right? So there's a lot of techniques that Carol Dweck speaks about, that we will come into in the next slides. But it's just this, it's that in a growth mindset, we are more focusing on how we can set realistic positivity. It's more realistic to what we can do with the things that we have, right? And we can, as an adult, as educators, as counselors, as therapists, we can inspire children to see the mistakes and learn a valuable lesson from that, rather than focusing on, "Oh my god, I failed." Because in our culture, I would say, with children that I worked with, failure is seen as the worst thing that can happen to you, right? It's not seen as something that is a learning experience, but rather something that you failed. So it's almost like a full stop rather than comma and continuing that sentence. So we are teaching children that it's okay to make mistakes, but then we can learn from these mistakes, learn that experience and move ahead and build that resilience within children. That's more realistic than just saying that failure is bad or making a mistake is bad. So here children are able to grow into that more realistic sense of themselves, um, and obviously to overcome and thrive in their environments. So basically, if we look at characteristics of growth mindset, it's that it's learning to embrace challenges. It's that when things get difficult, rather than looking at it as a struggle or looking at it as a burden, we look at that it as a challenge. It's that okay, what can I do to do better at this? Rather than fire sort of complaining about the problem, finding that okay, this is a challenge that I would want to take upon. So embracing challenges, viewing failure as an opportunity to learn, right? That's the thing I was mentioning earlier, that it's a more realistic view about life. And also persisting despite obstacles. So as we understand the characteristics, it's more realistic, it's more in touch with reality. And also seeing effort as a pathway to mastery, right? Rather than saying that it's just pure luck that you won, or it's just pure luck that you got something. Appreciating the effort, so appreciating that journey. So I think Soumya mentioned about how success is not just the end goal, it's also the process, and in the process you are learning so much. So we're just giving children that sort of just look at not just the end goal, look at the process of getting there. What have you learned in that process, right? So say child, grade 12, has sort of cleared NEET and is going to start their medical MBBS college. Rather than focusing on okay, I just got the NEET result, focusing on all the things, the studying, the working hard, the time management. There are so many skills this child has obtained, that something that you might forget when you get the goal, right? So sort of telling them, looking at that part also being as the something that they can get something out of. Welcoming constructive criticism and celebrating the success of others as an inspiration. So this is very much sort of against what a lot of people have been telling us, is that no, we should always grow, but then we cannot grow without others, right? So it's always looking at others, celebrating other people's successes, with and also using that as an inspiration rather than being jealous that oh, someone else, this whole concept, growing up compared, they're being compared to neighbors, or this whole in Indian terminology, it's such a common concept, Sharma ji ka beta. So it's rather than comparing yourself to that Sharma ji ka beta, focusing on how that person, what is their work ethic, and how can I implement Sharma ji ka beta's work ethic to get to where I want to be. There you're looking at this Sharma ji ka beta as an inspiration, right? So it's a lot of that. Only then we are able to trust that okay, I have the things that I want to sort of perceive, but I also have what I would say, the looking at other people and looking at them as an inspiration, basically that. So how can we promote this concept of growth mindset with students that we are working with children, etc.? So one very important thing is to praise the effort and the process. I think sometimes we often forget, like we are just focusing, okay, what's the last thing that you need to do, is to again help them in communicating, you're doing such a good job, sort of, you're so natural at this. Instead of saying you're natural at this, you can say that, I'm so happy, or I'm so proud that you were able to figure this out by yourself, right? Instead of saying that, oh, this is something that you're very good at from birth or something like that, rather than invalidating that thing that they have done, sort of appreciating that, or making them feel that okay, we are also part of this journey with them. So appreciating that praise, or giving them a lot of that effort, appreciating the effort, appreciating the process, then children also learn to appreciate that, right? And also is to reframe challenges, right? When challenges, obviously when children are given with something that's very tough, sometimes they might feel stuck, they're like, oh, this is too hard for me, I don't want to do it. But rather seeing it as opportunity. So it's a lot about how we change their mindset. It's not something that happens in a day, it's a lot in the way we communicate with the children, and the difference might not be seen in a day or two. It is something that they have to practice, right? So say child is not able to solve a particular math sum, or they're not able to solve a particular question paper, just tell them that it's a little bit tricky, but if you practice a little more, you'll get better at this. rather than saying, no, you're not going to do anything at all, it's not in your hands to solve this. Just giving them that push, right? And also normalizing mistakes, is that it is okay to make a mistake. Only from mistakes we all learn. I think often, more often than not, mistakes are sort of seen as this bad thing. um, but normalizing that it is okay to make mistakes, being empathetic with them, giving them examples about people who have failed, right? Because when we talk about people who inspire us, we always talk about people who have succeeded, right? We always look at, oh great, the greats, people who have a big name, who have succeeded. But rather, we never look at people who failed but then tried again. We never talk about the failure stories. We never talk about the stories, where they've made mistakes, or mistakes have taught them something. They, only when you go into books, when you go into biographies, you read it. But in general pop culture, general communication, we never see, people talking about mistakes. So a lot more of normalizing that with children, I think. Telling them stories, how, or showing them videos where, the characters, or the protagonist is failing but then still finding a way to get through it, right? And the fourth technique that, the psychologist talks about is the power of yet. I think this was a very, very interesting thing that also helped me with children I was working with, especially with like not toddlers, but like grade 1, grade 2, like that age group, is that the power of yet. you know Introducing the word yet into children's vocabulary just, takes them so many places. That future you will succeed, but then right now you have to put in the effort. You can't succeed right now, that's okay, but we will put in that we'll be persistent, and that effort will sort of show a fruit. So for example, if the child is saying that, oh, I can't do this, this is not meant for me, or I can't play football, or I can't play basketball, encouraging by the student by saying that, oh, I can't do this yet, but I'm getting there. Very simple as that. So I had this student, I think he was in the second or third grade, and this child was not able to write Kannada, right? Because his parents didn't know Kannada, so he was in school, he was struggling. Other subjects he was really good at, but only Kannada he was struggling a little bit, because he didn't have someone to teach him at home and all of that. But because the child was doing so good at this subject, other subjects, but not Kannada, teachers would be like, oh my god, he can't do this because he doesn't have people at home to teach him, or he doesn't have a good tutor, or giving a lot of reasons. So the child also internalized that very simple thing that, oh, I can't learn Kannada, it's okay, I'm good at Hindi, right? So then I just told him, no, it's okay, it's, you can't do this yet, but yet, with a lot of practice and with a lot of this one, you will be able to learn Kannada, right? It's not that hard. And then immediately the child, changing that vocabulary of the child before he could even get better. Then after that, the child was put into remedial for Kannada and all of that. But but after a week or two, when I told him to just say that, the next 2 weeks he was like, I can't do Kannada yet, but ma'am is doing remedial, so I'm getting better, right? And by the end of the year, this child was able to write Kannada very fluently from when he was not able to, right? So it's just the how the vocabulary, and how with that one word their whole mindset changes from just being very sad and to just a more optimistic, mindset. And obviously the next thing is to encourage self reflection with children. Is that, what have they learned from certain things, what have they. So when we're doing these SEL activities, giving them a lot of the moral of the story, giving the moral of a story, or the moral of whatever has happened, gives them a lot of self reflection in as to what have I learned out of this experience, right? And also we also have to give them constructive feedback when we feel that, rather than judging their performance, we give them, you did a good job, let's work on this aspect of it, right? So giving them that, but without any judgment. And it is to model this, again, with mindsets, it's not something that can happen in a day. It is something that we have to model. So for us to model, we should also inculcate that aspect into our life. So we can't have a fixed mindset and go into an environment trying to preach growth mindset. It's that, is that we should also have that in our lives. I think as therapists, or at least people in the mental health field, a lot of what we do to our clients, what we do to our students, in any, not just in schools, is that we have to also practice what we preach. I think it's a very, very important principle. is that when we are practicing this, we should also be able to do that within our own lives. So a lot of self reflection, all of what we've discussed comes back to us also, is that having that own willingness to grow. So we should be able to fail in front of our students as well, and then only then we can promote growth mindset. If we are sort of the ideal, sort of putting a facade that we are doing great and all of that, sometimes that doesn't translate very organically. So being able to have show our own willingness, giving them our personal struggles, how did we succeed maybe when we were their age, giving them that sort of examples, and talking about how we overcame certain challenges can help them. That also inspires them, like I think growing up when I was a child, not you know would always appreciate teachers who were more honest in class. Like, say if they forgot to, bring the chalk piece, rather than acting like, it was all okay, they would be like, what, I forgot today. I think I was coming on the way and I think my mind just, so I forgot the chalk. That's more honest, that's more organic than, say, someone who's just very stoic and very strict all the time. So if we want to preach this, we should also have that as a habit. And obviously, it's also to create a growth oriented environment. Is that should establish a culture where we appreciate curiosity, we appreciate the effort, not just the end result, but also the effort that is going into creating growth mindset. So yeah, you can do just like some example, like I found this graphic very interesting, is that a fixed mindset is that it's very concrete. It's just like, it's a very fixed state of mind that I can't do this is too hard for me, or I'm afraid of making a mistake, I have to be perfect. But in a growth mindset, you are looking at, I can't do this is meaning of, I can maybe try a different strategy, maybe I'm just not having the right approach right now, but I can try something else, or I can ask someone else. So here it's a lot of, it's very fluid. Your mind has to be very fluid to have a growth mindset. So with children, especially with younger children at least, I think sort of telling them or giving them a lecture wouldn't work. So we have to, I think a lot of work goes into, giving them worksheets like this, giving them, TLM material where it's more creative, at least for younger children, at least below fifth grade. A lot of this, how can we change a particular fixed mindset thought that we have to a more fluid or a more growth mindset related thought. So these are some worksheets that I found online. You can use Canva, basic graphic design, make some worksheets for children, or you can even draw it on the board and ask them to do it, even if we don't have access to resources. It's very simple. So a lot of activities, a lot of tailored to children are available that you can look at. So I found this negative thought sheet something that was quite helpful for me also as a professional, is that having a fixed mindset, like, like I can't do this or I'm not good at this, how can that thought be changed into a more positive mind, especially with clients, with students I was working with. This also help with adults, but I think with children, I think if you make it in a more fancy, colorful way, I think children really like it. So yeah, so these are also like, self-esteem. So it's very related or linked to self-esteem as well, growth mindset. Only when we have this fluid mindset, we are able to grow, and that also impacts our self-esteem, which is something that we will be going up. So again, when we talk about the research that's being done around growth mindset, is that there's a lot of research that shows that it's very important for children for their academic and personal development, right? So there, a lot of studies were done, and it was shown that having a positive self-esteem makes things easier for children. So again, so now we'll talk about self-esteem. I think self-esteem is a very self-explanatory stash. It's been used a lot. We keep hearing about this all the time, and if we are working in the field of mental health, I think a lot of our work also goes around self-esteem and helping students, etc. So with children though, it's very important because it's the foundation of their emotional well-being. Right now they're like a clay being molded, and whatever how the clay is being molded is how that clay will react when they grow up, right? So we are like, we are like the potters, or we are like the ceramicists, where we are molding the child. So for their mental health, it is very crucial that their self-esteem, they are able to trust themselves. So having a positive self-esteem means that they are able to trust themselves even in a situation where they cannot, right? It's that I can do it, or I, even if I don't know it right now, I can find a way to do it, right? So it is that strength or that confidence that they have with themselves. So it that helps with resilience, when and the ability to navigate challenges in life. Rather than telling children that there's no going to be no challenges, give them that thing that there will be challenges, but with the right mindset you will be able to get through, right? So it is very important to boost or sort of increase the self-esteem within children. Um, and children with with healthy self-esteem are more likely to believe in themselves, in their own abilities. They're able to take on new challenges, right? And even persist in the face of setbacks. So if one time they fail, they wouldn't lose hope. So it is that, or sort of having a more positive attitude or a more realistic attitude towards learning and growth, right? So that is why we need sort of self-esteem, and how, as sort of people working around children, it's very important for us to help children with this. So again, research also suggests that a lower self-esteem can hinder a child's academic performance and their social interaction, because academics as a thing is something that keeps evolving, right? Something that they learned in the second grade and something that they learn in the fourth grade is very different, and the challenges might keep increasing, right? But then when they have a lower self-esteem, they would be like, oh, I can't do this, this is not something that's meant for me, and that obviously puts them a little bit back. So having can hinder their academic performance. Like, it can hinder their social interaction, because they feel like they can't talk to other people because they feel quite insecure, or they feel quite lost within themselves. While when they have a higher self-esteem, it fosters a more positive attitude, and they're able to adapt very well. I think as humans, we are constantly evolving and adapting, which is why I think it's where we need a healthy self-esteem, right? So with children, how can we promote self-esteem? Again, a lot of self-esteem, growth mindset, anything like this, especially for children, mainly comes from the way we talk to them, the way we communicate with them, and also educating their caregivers and all of them on how they can talk to their children. The first thing is, as similar to the growth mindset, is that being very genuine and being specific with the praise. So instead of saying, oh, you are amazing, you're the best, it's just a very vague thing. It's not sort of specific to what task they have completed, what skill they are showing, right? So if a child can play the guitar really well, you can say that you're really good at playing the guitar, or you're really good at playing this particular song or this particular style of guitar. But if you're just saying, oh, you are amazing, you're the best, the child does it, the child feels, okay, I'm good at everything. Then what happens, the high self-esteem gets inflated. But when we say very specific to specific skill or specific thing that they've displayed, it's like, okay, I'm good at this, and then they would want to hold that, right? And also encouraging positive self-talk. It's not just what we tell them, it's also how they talk to themselves, right? So when they solve a problem, being able to communicate with themselves, that, oh, I can do this, I can do hard things, or I am good at learning these new skills, or I am good at doing this particular thing. That is something that children also have to learn, being able to appreciate themselves, right? I think as adults also we realize how hard it gets sometimes, to appreciate ourselves for the thing that we are doing. We're like, oh, that's so cheesy, because somewhere down the line when we were growing up, it was told that, oh, we shouldn't flatter ourselves too much, or we shouldn't say these things about ourselves. So now when we try to do that to ourselves, it sounds so cheesy. Like, a lot of my clients, adults that I work with, tell me this, and then I look at children, I'm like, okay, now I think we have to teach them, that it's okay to praise yourself, it's okay to appreciate yourself, and then growing up it won't sound as cheesy. It'll just become a part of your vocabulary, right? And also learning to celebrate the strengths, acknowledge how, what are the qualities a specific child has and how that is helping them. You have a great image, especially with younger kids, when they're able to tell a story by themselves. Sometimes what happens, they might be sort of talking because they're very excited to share it with you. Um, but rather than dismissing them or being that, stop talking, saying very harsh words like that, oh, you just sort of appreciate that, oh my god, you have such a great imagination, or you're so good at storytelling, you're able to keep me hooked onto your story, or just giving them that particular praise, right? I think that will also help children understand, okay, this is something I'm good at, and they would want to explore that more. We just have to nudge them towards a direction. I think children pick on very quickly from there, right? We just have to push them towards what they are good at, and immediately they will catch up, right? I've noticed so many children, by just nudging them or pushing them into the direction, they've been able to sort of nourish whatever talents that they are having, right? I had this child in the fifth grade, who was very good at making up, stories. Like, she would write stories, and but nobody around her would appreciate. They'll be like, okay, why are you wasting your time? Focus that time on studying, don't do all of this. So she stopped writing. But then I sort of went through her story. She showed it to me because we built the rapport, whatever. And then I was like, oh, this is really good. And because I appreciated her, the next, like, I think in a month or something, she came back with like three more stories. She's like, ma'am, I stayed up after finishing my homework because, you told me I was very good at this. So I wanted to write more stories for you. That immediately that child, just because of my appreciation, or I don't want to say my appreciation, but someone gave her that nudge, and she was able to harness. And each and every story got better, like the vocabulary and the grammar. And you could see that based on what she was learning in an English class, also her grammar was, getting better. So it's as small as that. We might feel like, okay, this is not doing anything because we're not seeing, tangible rewards in front of us. But a lot of mental health work is like, it's sort of like compounding. It compounds very beautifully with children, at least. And also setting up achievable goals that children can do, rather than setting up a very big goal, and then if they don't achieve that, getting, making them feel disheartened. Focusing, setting up achievable goals based on the child's strengths and weaknesses. And also avoiding comparison. I think this is, as I mentioned earlier, is to avoid comparison and to encourage this skill of problem solving, right? That is what builds resilience. I think during COVID as well, I keep bringing up COVID for problem solving, is because I think a lot of, I think people dealt with COVID in their own ways, right? Everybody was able to problem solve this boredom very beautifully, and everybody sort of came out of COVID with, say, new skill or a new hobby or something like that. So it's very, very important to develop and encourage that problem solving skill. Is that, how were you able to tackle this challenge? What were the problems? How did you come up with the solution? So it sort of, helps them also keep themselves very active, right? And is to model self compassion. Is that how they can be kind to themselves, and creating very supportive environment. So a lot of, I think, the points that we were discussing, I think, keeps overlapping, because again, I think a lot of it comes back into the way we communicate with, the students around us. So when we look at self-esteem, I think, teaching them certain coping mechanism, teaching them certain statements, especially, children who might already come with us to us, say, with lower self-esteem, or who might need help in that sense. I think it's very important that we sort of have to start from a ground up. It's quite harder with younger children. I think it's much more easier for us to ease in, because we are teaching them from a younger age. But say children who are in the ninth or 10th grade, they're coming to us. We notice that, this is something that they might be going through. We can help them in this sense, by teaching them activities around, journaling, where they're getting in touch with themselves. They're able to understand what they're feeling, to give them that space where they can just fully empathize with themselves. I think that is one. And also they are able to just let themselves out, instead of, because a lot of growing up, they might have had to push these feelings away. They might have had to push a lot of these insecurities away to stay afloat, right? But to let that come on the surface, and then give them a solution in terms of, okay, let's try, maybe, can we look at it from this perspective? Can we look at this from a different perspective? So giving them just a perspective shift, and seeing how that works for children, right? So in that sense, I think growth mindset is very realistic, because it doesn't give like a very high hope or a very big goal. It's just, sort of appreciating the little things, or appreciating every milestone that we are going through. So, like a lot of programs, like brainology, or initiatives that have been done globally, in schools around South Africa and Denmark. A lot of studies have shown that, done in these particular regions, about how having a growth mindset or improving self-esteem can improve the outcomes of students. They've been seen changes in academic performance. They've seen changes, a child who might have been very quiet is able to express themselves a little more. And especially for students with disadvantaged backgrounds, maybe, where they do not have high income families, or they might have, growing up in war zones, etc. There, I think, sort of giving them, sort of teaching them how to be resilient, teaching them how they can see despite, see a future for themselves, right? So I think a lot of that comes from research that's been done around growth mindset and self-esteem. So I think, as by integrating a lot of these principles into, our teaching and our counseling, I think we as professionals can create a very supportive environment for our students, that not only helps with their academic success, but also, I think, nurtures their holistic development. Because I think only focusing on, okay, studies is not going to help. I think we've reached that part, at least in society, as as a whole, that we are able to see that only academic success is not something that is needed, but then to become holistic individuals, you need a good mental, you need good, better mental health. You need, your self concept, your self esteem, the trust that you have with yourself has to be really nice. I think with this, I am sort of coming to an end to my part of the workshop. I am sort of opening up the space for questions. We can have a general discussion about what we had discussed today. If you have any questions or any experiences where you've helped children sort of with self-esteem, you've helped children, or what were some things that you used, I think I'm just opening up this space for that. Do you have any questions um, to ask me? Okay. um, I got a question from Soumya. How to motivate a student to study who is thinking of passing an exam, is enough for a job, but no need to study more. So here, Soumya, I think is first to understand what are the goals of the child. What are the small term goals and what are the long term goals of the child. So here, if the child is feeling that, I only need to pass a job, pass an exam to get a job, here we need to understand, okay, what are your goals from studying. So here it seems that, the child has a fixed mindset. Okay, education means I will get a job and that's enough. They don't see the process of passing an exam or learning for the exam as something that will give them knowledge, give them understanding of, a lot of the things that are happening around us. It just seems like, it just seemed as a path for this child to reach the next goal, which is that to get a job, right? So here we need to ask the child, what are your small term goals, what are your long term goals. If you want to get a job, what kind of job do you want to get? So there what happens, we are giving the child a more broader perspective about what his life is. Maybe we have to understand why the child feels that, education is just to get a job, right? And then we have to change, sort of come to that perspective, put in that, give him that understanding about how much have you learned about yourself, how much have you learned about society around you by just studying for these exams. Trying to understand all of that, and then maybe pushing him towards the direction where, the child can, maybe that will help the child understand that passing an exam or getting a degree is not just to get a job, then also to widen your scope, right? I hope that answered your question, Samya. Asta asks, how does social media use, play into all this? And okay, how does social media use play into all this, and how can it be channeled? Asta, it's a very, I understood the question, but then, what do you mean by into all of this? Could you sort of give me a little bit clarity on that? You can unmute yourself, that's okay, or if you feel comfortable, you can put on chat. Do you
Right,
mean?
right.
Huh.
So the question was about self-esteem and social media because I think a lot of the concerns that you mentioned about self-esteem uh, do not really stem in the adolescent population that I work with, don't stem from the comments made by teachers or parents, but by their
Okay.
own peers on social media. By
Hmm.
how they are seeing, like,
Hmm.
again, unrealistic standards and all of these
Hmm.
things on
Hmm.
social media.
Understood.
And all of this also, again, then stems from how they perceive content there and how they
Hmm.
model their expectations
Hmm.
from it.
Hmm.
But then at the same time, since this is also something that we can't, as school counselors, control a lot in terms of how the
Correct.
parents pay
Hmm.
attention to things like these,
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that becomes a roadblock in our work. And I wanted to understand if there are any ways in reaching the children and being able to understand that this is how it's affecting them and how it can be changed for
Mm,
them.
mm, got it. I think it's a very beautiful question, by the way, because I think with social media, at least, I think there's a lot of unrealistic standards set for, even as adults. Like, we are using social media, so many unrealistic standards set for us as well, right? But then how do we tackle that? I think is one, to have the knowledge that what we see out there is not the reality of the world. It's a very made up version of society. It's only showing the good sides of the society and doesn't really focus. It's not very realistic. It's very, I'm not getting the very aspirational, right? A lot of content that we see. So I think very important is to teach children, or sort of give them the awareness that what we see online is not reality. It's a very fabricated version of reality, and that is something that we have to keep telling them, because I know that clients or children come in, they're like, I want to be this way, or I want to do this, or my friends are talking. I think then it becomes more sort of inherent for us to help them with growing their self-esteem, or giving them that thing that I am, when they have that trust with themselves, it would become a little more harder for them to sort of get that into their head, that okay, this is something, this is something that I would want. So I think giving them that realistic understanding of how social media exists, or sort of teaching them about algorithms, I think with adolescents at least, like how these algorithms are tailored, how social media has come into existence for this very particular reason. It is a medium of capitalism that is sort of helping, sort of breaking everybody down, and that is something, giving them that awareness as to what they're seeing is not right. I think that is somewhere where we can start with, and then maybe focusing on, okay, what are your strengths, what are some things that you are good at, and then rooting that back to self-esteem work. I think that is something that I would want to consider working with adolescents. I hope that answered your question. Okay. um, Okay, Soumya also says that, in my case, also children are very motivated by social media. He saves a lot of posts related on how to succeed without studying much, right? And he's trusting those reels, because again, reels show a very, or just social media content in general, show a very, because it's only 60 seconds, 30 seconds. You can't really show the whole perspective of how much time it takes to actually, do all of the work. A lot of self-help books, a lot of self-help related content. I think I was also a consumer of content like this, where, growing up, at least during college and all of that, having very unrealistic idea about productivity, unrealistic idea about, this growth mindset. It was very two dimensional, where it was just, oh, if I just work for 8 hours a day, everything will be okay, my life will be fine. Nobody talks about burnout. Nobody talks about how your motivation levels keep fluctuating. Nobody talks about how certain your life events is going to affect how much motivation you have. So I say, child growing up in a environment, where parents are fighting, all of that, that child versus a child who has a more healthier life, or a healthier home environment, will have different levels of perception of the world, or perception of understanding, or that concentration level. All of that will be differing. So I think, with social media, I think that is also, I would say, a bane of social media, is that it sort of gives children these unrealistic expectations. So it gets a lot harder for us to come and, sort of make them unlearn a lot of that, teach them more realistic understanding of what success means, or what reaching a goal means. I think a lot of work, I think, would come over there. And also, I think educating parents, if it's with children, at least educating parents to not let children consume, or sort of having workshops, if your school sort of letting you do that, having workshops for parents and helping them understand what are the sort of repercussions that social media, the internet, all of that has. So I hope this sort of brought context to that. I'm more open to maybe what are things that other people have done to combat this. This is something I would do. But like if there's something else, would love to hear that as well.
Any more questions?
Hi,
Hi.
is it Rashi?
Is it Rashi? Yeah, yeah.
Hi.
Any more questions? I think we can culminate the session, Laksha.
Hmm. Okay,
Uh,
Rashi.
yeah, thank you so much, Laksha, for this wonderful workshop. I think we've had a great insight into you quoting practical examples of how to work with children in a school setup and an integrated setup, an inclusive setup. So thank you so much on stressing on those aspects. Uh, I would also like to thank you for taking up these important questions, as most of our counselors do face these difficulties where we are working with children, and how we can sort of bring them on stage by their own capabilities. So thank you so much for this workshop, and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in and being a patient participants here.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think the questions also helped me a lot. So maybe the next workshop I would want to focus on effects of social media and this aspect on how we can help with mental health and social media. So thank you so much. Thank you, Devishri. Thank you, Soumya. Thank you, Tamarai. Thank you, Vidya.